The massive ships appeared in Earth's sky without warning. They were bigger than mountains, black as space itself, and they moved with the slow certainty of death. Commander SCI-FI stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the blue and green world below. His forearms moved across the control panels with practiced ease. His large black eyes showed no emotion as he studied the data streaming across his screens. "Status report," he said in his clicking language. "Scanning complete." "Commander," replied his second officer, Veltar. "Population approximately 8 billion. Bipedal mammals. Tool users. Technology level is primitive as expected." SCI-FI nodded his elongated head. This was going to be easy. The Kethmori had done this operation hundreds of times across dozens of worlds. Find a primitive species, take the strongest ones, break their will, turn them into workers for the great mines and factories of the hegemony. These humans looked perfect for the job. The scans showed they were spread across one small world, fighting each other with crude weapons. They had no space travel beyond. Their own moon, no energy shields, no plasma weapons, just simple metal projectiles and chemical explosives. "Begin Phase 1, SCI-FI commanded. Across the fleet of 50 harvester ships, the same orders echoed. Thousands of Kethmori soldiers prepared their equipment. Neural suppression collars were loaded into transport pods. Capture nets were tested and armed. Everything had to be perfect for a clean harvest. The Kethmori had learned long ago that quick, overwhelming force was the key to successful slave gathering. Hit hard, hit fast, and break their spirit before they could organize resistance. Most species surrendered within hours once they saw the futility of fighting back. "Deployment zones selected," reported the tactical officer. "Major population, centers identified. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, Beijing. Capturing these areas will net us approximately 50 million specimens." SCI-FI felt satisfaction ripple through his chest plates. 50 million slaves would be more than enough to meet their quota. The mining operations on Kepler 442b needed fresh workers, and humans looked strong enough to last several years before wearing out. "Begin descent," he ordered. The first wave of harvester pods broke away from the main ships. Each pod was the size of a city block, designed to land in populated areas and deploy capture fields that would paralyze any resistance. The neural suppression technology had never failed. Once the collars were attached, the specimens became docile and obedient. SCI-FI watched his screens as the pods descended through Earth's atmosphere. Everything looked normal. The humans below seemed unaware of what was coming. Their primitive communications networks were already being jammed by Kethmori technology. The first pod landed in what the humans called Central Park in New York City. Immediately, the suppression field activated, sending waves of neural static across several city blocks. Capture teams poured out of the pod, each soldier equipped with collars and stunning weapons. But something was wrong. "Commander," Veltar's voice carried a note of confusion, "the neural suppression is not working properly." SCI-FI's eyes narrowed as he studied the feeds from the capture teams. The humans were not falling unconscious as they should. Instead, they were running and screaming. Some were even fighting back. "Impossible," SCI-FI muttered. "The suppression field works on all known nervous systems." On his screen, he watched a human in some kind of uniform point a crude weapon at one of his soldiers. The projectile that came from the weapon hit the Kethmori trooper's shield and penetrated it. The soldier fell to the ground, blue blood spreading across the grass. "Report!" SCI-FI barked. "Sir, their weapons are penetrating our defensive shields," came the panicked voice of the ground team leader. "These metal projectiles are not being stopped by our energy barriers." This made no sense. Kethmori shields were designed to deflect energy weapons and plasma bolts. No species they had encountered used solid projectiles as primary weapons. It was too primitive, too inefficient. More reports flooded in from other landing sites. In London, human aircraft were attacking the harvester pods with explosive weapons. In Tokyo, ground forces were using vehicles mounted with rapid-fire projectile weapons. In Moscow, something the humans called tanks were rolling toward the landing zones. "How many casualties?" SCI-FI demanded. 43 dead, over 100 wounded, Veltar reported, his voice shaking. "Commander, they are fighting with coordination we did not expect. Their military response time is unprecedented." SCI-FI studied the tactical displays. The humans were not behaving like any species the Keth Mori had encountered before. Most civilizations took hours or even days to organize a response to alien contact. These humans had military units engaging his forces within minutes of the first landing. "Sir," another officer called out, "we are detecting massive energy signatures from their orbital installations." "What orbital installations?" SCI-FI snapped. Intelligence reported no significant space-based defenses. "These appear to be weapons platforms, sir, hidden on their moon and in orbit around their planet." Suddenly, streaks of light began rising from Earth's surface. The primitive missiles looked slow and clumsy compared to Keth Mori technology, but there were hundreds of them. Thousands. "Evasive maneuvers," SCI-FI ordered. The first missile struck the harvester ship Torvex, instead of the minor damage expected. From a primitive chemical explosive, the ship's entire port section erupted in flames. The missile had been carrying some kind of nuclear warhead. "They have atomic weapons!" Veltar screamed. SCI-FI's blood ran cold. Nuclear weapons meant these humans understood controlled fusion. That was not primitive technology. That was the foundation of galactic civilization. More missiles struck the fleet. The humans were not launching random attacks. They were targeting specific systems, hitting the ship's weakest points with surgical precision. Someone was guiding these weapons with detailed knowledge of Keth Mori ship design. "Sir, we have a problem," the communications officer reported. "One of our soldiers has been captured alive. The humans are... They are taking him apart." "Taking him apart?" "Yes, sir. They appear to be studying his equipment and biology in real time. They have already figured out how to operate his weapon." This was impossible. Keth Mori technology was centuries ahead of anything these humans should understand. It took most species years of study to even begin comprehending alien technology. SCI-FI watched in horror as more reports came in. Human soldiers were not just defending their positions. They were advancing. Some had somehow made it aboard the grounded harvester pods and were fighting Keth Mori troops in hand-to-hand combat. And they were winning. "Commander," Veltar said quietly, "what are your orders?" SCI-FI looked at the tactical display. In less than 3 hours, his force had gone from confident invaders to desperate defenders. 7 harvester ships were severely damaged. 3 had been completely destroyed. Casualty reports showed over 500 Keth Mori dead and wounded. The humans had lost thousands, but they kept fighting. They did not break. They did not surrender. Every time his forces gained ground, more human reinforcements appeared with heavier weapons. "Sir," the sensor operator called out, "we are detecting human aircraft approaching from multiple directions. These appear to be different from their previous fighters." SCI-FI looked at the new contacts on his screen. These aircraft were larger, more heavily armed. As he watched, they began launching new types of missiles that seemed to adjust, their course in flight tracking his ships like living things. "Guided weapons," he whispered. "They have artificial intelligence." The first smart missile struck the harvester ship Kolmek directly in its command center. The explosion was so powerful it could be seen from the surface. The ship broke apart and fell into Earth's ocean in burning pieces. "Commander, we must retreat," Veltar urged. "This is not going according to plan." But SCI-FI was staring at something else on his screens. Human ground forces had reached one of the crash sites and were pulling Keth Mori technology from the wreckage. As he watched, human engineers began connecting alien power cells to their own equipment. "They are reverse engineering our technology," he said in disbelief. "In real time. This was supposed to be a simple harvest operation. take slaves from a primitive world and leave. But these humans were not primitive. They were not helpless. They were dangerous in ways the Keth Mori had never encountered. "Sir, incoming transmission from the surface," the communications officer reported. "From who?" "The humans, sir. They are broadcasting on our frequencies." Zexhi felt his stomach turn cold. The humans had cracked Keth Mori communications in less than 4 hours. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers spoke broken but understandable galactic standard. "Attention, alien vessels. This is General Rodriguez of the United Earth Defense Force. You have attacked our world without provocation. Surrender now, and we will allow you to leave. Continue this aggression, and we will destroy every one of your ships." Zexhi almost laughed. Surrender to primitives? It was unthinkable. But as he looked at his tactical displays, he realized the humans were not making an empty threat. They had already proven they could destroy his ships. How did they learn our language so quickly? Veltar asked. "The same way they learned everything else," Zexhi replied grimly. "They adapt." Another wave of missiles rose from Earth's surface. This time they were moving faster and turning more sharply. The humans had improved their weapons in the few hours since the battle began. "All ships, prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace," Zexhi ordered. "Sir, we cannot abandon the ground teams," Veltar protested. Zexhi closed his eyes. Standard Keth Mori doctrine was clear. If a harvest operation failed, ground teams were expendable. But looking at these humans, he suspected his soldiers would not live long enough to be rescued anyway. "Begin jump sequence," he commanded. As the surviving Keth Mori ships prepared to flee Earth's system, Zexhi received one final report from the surface. Human forces had captured a complete harvester pod intact, along with all its technology and several live Keth Mori prisoners. The primitives now had access to interstellar technology. Zexhi realized with growing horror that this was not the end of the conflict. This was just the beginning. Dr. Sarah Chen had been studying marine biology when the aliens arrived. Now, 18 hours after the first attack, she found herself staring at the body of a dead alien soldier in a makeshift laboratory beneath the Pentagon. The creature was tall and thin, with gray skin that felt like leather. 4 arms ending in hands with 3 fingers each, large black eyes that took up most of its face. No visible ears or nose, just small slits in the skull. "This is incredible," she whispered to Colonel Martinez, who stood beside her wearing full combat gear. "Look at the bone structure, the muscle density. They are built for low-gravity environments." "Can you tell us how to kill them more efficiently?" Martinez asked bluntly. Sarah looked up from her examination. "Colonel, this is the first proof of alien life in human history. Should we not be trying to communicate with them?" Martinez pointed toward the ceiling, where they could still hear the distant sound of explosions. "Doctor, they came here to take us as slaves. Communication failed when they started shooting." Sarah nodded reluctantly and returned to her work. The aliens' equipment was scattered across several tables. The weapon looked like a rifle, but it fired bursts of energy instead of bullets. The armor was some kind of flexible metal that could stop small arms fire but had failed against larger caliber weapons. Most interesting was the collar-like device that had been attached to the alien's neck. "This is some kind of neural interface," Sarah explained, running her hands over the strange metal band. "See these contact points? They would press against the spine and brain stem. I think this is how they control their slaves." "Can we use it on them?" Martinez asked. "I do not know. Their nervous system is completely different from ours. But, Colonel, we captured 3 of them alive upstairs. If I could examine them—" Martinez shook his head. "Too dangerous. The CIA boys are questioning them now." Through the walls, Sarah could hear muffled screaming. She tried not to think about what kind of questioning was happening. "Doctor," Martinez said, "I need to know everything about their technology. Our boys are fighting them with World War II tactics, and it is barely working. We need an edge. Sarah nodded and picked up the alien weapon. It was lighter than it looked, perfectly balanced in her hands. The trigger mechanism was designed for three-fingered hands, but she could make it work. The power cell is here, she said, pointing to a glowing cylinder in the weapon's stock. Some kind of miniature fusion battery. This single cell probably contains more energy than a car engine produces in a year. Can we copy it? Copy it? Colonel, this technology is decades ahead of anything we have, maybe centuries. It would take our best scientists years just to understand how it works. But even as she said it, Sarah was already forming ideas. The power cell connected to the weapon through a simple interface. If they could not copy the technology, maybe they could steal it. Above them, the building shook as another explosion echoed through the city. The aliens had retreated to orbit, but they were still launching attacks. Smaller ships were hitting targets around the world, trying to rescue their stranded soldiers. "Doctor?" a new voice called from the doorway. Sarah turned to see a young lieutenant covered in dust and blood. "General Rodriguez wants to see you immediately." They made their way through corridors filled with running soldiers and emergency lights. The Pentagon had become a war zone command center overnight. Every room was filled with people shouting orders, studying maps, and coordinating the global defense effort. General Rodriguez stood in front of a massive wall display showing the tactical situation around the world. Red dots marked alien positions. Blue dots showed human forces. The picture was not encouraging. "Dr. Chen," Rodriguez said without turning around. "What can you tell me about their technology?" "Their weapons use directed energy. Their armor is advanced but not invulnerable. Their ships seem to have some kind of energy shielding that stops our missiles but not our bullets." "Why bullets and not missiles?" Sarah thought about that. "I think their shields are designed to stop energy weapons and high-velocity projectiles. Our missiles travel fast and carry electronic guidance systems. Their shields can detect and deflect them, but bullets are just chunks of metal moving relatively slowly. The shields do not see them as threats." Rodriguez finally turned to face her. His uniform was torn and his face was covered in cuts. "We shot down 2 of their small ships over Nevada. Our people are taking them apart right now. How long before we can understand their technology?" "Sir, with respect, that is not how scientific research works. This technology is completely alien. It could take decades to—" "Doctor," Rodriguez interrupted, "we do not have decades. We have reports of more alien ships heading toward Earth. A lot more ships. We need to level the playing field, and we need to do it fast." On the wall display, new contacts were appearing at the edge of the solar system. Dozens of them. The aliens were bringing reinforcements. "There is something else," Rodriguez continued. "We intercepted some of their communications. Our computer specialists are working on translation, but we think we understand the basic message." He pressed a button, and alien voices filled the room. The sounds were like clicking and chirping, completely unlike any human language. "What are they saying?" Sarah asked. "Near as we can tell, they are calling for help. Not military help. They are asking for slave-handling specialists and psychologists. They think we are too aggressive to be useful as workers." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "They want to break us, turn us into docile servants." "That is what they do, Doctor. We found records in their ships. They have enslaved dozens of species across the galaxy. Entire civilizations reduced to cattle." The wall display flickered and changed to show images captured from alien computers, pictures of other worlds, other species, all of them wearing the same collar devices Sarah had examined downstairs. Some looked like giant insects, others were reptilian, a few were almost human-like, but with fur or scales. All had the same empty, defeated expression in their eyes. "My God," Sarah whispered. "How many?" "Billions," Rodriguez replied. "Maybe trillions. This Kethamori hegemony has been doing this for thousands of years. Earth is just the latest target. But why us? Why now?" Because we are strong, we are intelligent, and apparently we make good workers. Rodriguez's voice was bitter. They have been watching us for decades, waiting for the right time to harvest us. Sarah looked at the images of enslaved aliens and felt anger building in her chest. These creatures had treated entire civilizations like livestock. They had turned thinking beings into property. "Sir," she said slowly, "what if we could reverse their technology? Instead of them controlling us, what if we could control them?" Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "The neural collars. They are designed to suppress free will and create obedience. But the basic technology is just electronic control of nervous systems. If we could modify the frequency, adjust the output, you could turn their own weapons against them." "It is just a theory, sir. I would need time to study the devices, and we would need test subjects." Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Doctor, we have 3 live aliens upstairs and more coming every hour. As our forces capture their soldiers, you will have all the test subjects you need." "Sir, that would be experimenting on sentient beings. The ethical implications—" "Doctor," Rodriguez said quietly, "they came here to make us slaves. They have enslaved countless other species. Ethics went out the window when they fired the first shot." Sarah nodded reluctantly. She thought about the images of defeated aliens wearing slave collars, about the billions of beings who had lost their freedom to the Keth Mori, about Earth's children who would grow up as property if the aliens succeeded. "I will need a full laboratory, computer access, and a team of specialists. You will have whatever you need. Doctor, how long before you can give us something useful?" Sarah looked at the wall display showing incoming alien reinforcements. "Give me 72 hours. You have 24. Sir, that is not nearly enough time to—" Another explosion shook the building. Dust fell from the ceiling as emergency alarms began wailing. "Doctor," Rodriguez said firmly, "you have 24 hours, because that is how long our computers estimate before the alien reinforcements arrive. After that, there might not be a free human left on Earth to benefit from your research." Sarah looked around the command center. Every person in the room was working desperately to save their species from slavery. She thought about her younger brother in college, her parents in California, all the people she loved who would become property of alien masters if she failed. "I understand, sir. 24 hours. As she left the command center, Sarah's mind was already racing with possibilities. The alien technology was advanced, but it was still just technology. Humans had always been good at taking things apart and putting them back together in new ways. The aliens had made a mistake coming to Earth. They had expected to find a primitive species that would break easily under pressure. Instead, they had found humans. And humans, Sarah reflected grimly, had spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to turn the tools of their enemies against them. Time to teach the galaxy what that meant. Captain Maria Santos had never expected to be fighting aliens in space. 3 days ago, she had been commanding a nuclear submarine in the Pacific Ocean. Now she was leading a boarding party through the corridors of an alien spacecraft using weapons that had been science fiction just hours before. The ship's artificial gravity felt strange under her feet. Too light, like walking on the moon. The walls curved in ways that hurt her eyes to look at, and the air smelled like copper and ozone. "Contact ahead," whispered Sergeant Murphy through her headset. 2 hostiles, moving toward Section 7. Maria raised her hand to signal the team to stop. They were carrying a mix of human and alien weapons now. The energy rifles they had taken from dead Keth Mori soldiers were powerful, but they had limited ammunition. The modified neural collars that Dr. Chen's team had developed were their secret weapon. "Remember the plan," Maria said quietly. "We take them alive if possible, dead if necessary, but we need their command codes." Her team nodded. They had been volunteers from the most elite Special Forces units on Earth, Rangers, SEALs, SAS, Spetsnaz. All of them had trained for impossible missions, but nothing had prepared them for this. The Kethmori ship had been damaged in the initial fighting and forced to land in Nevada. Instead of trying to destroy it, General Rodriguez had ordered it, captured intact. He wanted the technology, the intelligence, and most importantly, proof that humans could beat the aliens at their own game. Maria's team moved forward through the ship's twisting corridors. The design made no sense from a human perspective. Doors that opened sideways instead of up and down, control panels mounted on the ceiling, everything built for creatures with 4 arms and different body proportions. "Captain," came Dr. Chen's voice through the radio, "remember that their neural structure is different from ours. The modified collars should work, but the effect might not be immediate." "Understood, Doc. How many hostiles are we looking at?" "Thermal scans show approximately 30 Kethmori still alive on the ship. Most are wounded. They have barricaded themselves in the command center." Maria smiled grimly. Barricades were something humans understood very well. Her team had explosives that could crack any door, and tactics that had been tested in urban warfare around the world. They reached the command center after 10 minutes of careful movement. The door was sealed with some kind of energy field that sparked and hummed with power. Sergeant Rodriguez, the team's demolitions expert, studied it with professional interest. "Looks like a fusion containment field," he said. "But they are using it backwards, trying to keep us out instead of keeping plasma in. Can you break it? Give me 5 minutes and some of those alien power cells we captured." While Rodriguez worked on the door, Maria studied the tactical situation. Her team was just one of dozens that had been organized in the past 72 hours. Around the world, human forces were adapting alien technology with frightening speed. The Russians had figured out how to mount alien energy weapons on their tanks. The Chinese were mass-producing modified neural collars based on Dr. Chen's designs. The Americans had cracked the aliens' computer systems and were reading their communications in real time. Most impressive was what the Europeans had done. A joint team of scientists from CERN had taken apart an alien fusion reactor and rebuilt it to power their particle accelerator. They were using the Large Hadron Collider to create new types of ammunition that could penetrate any known alien armor. "Door is ready," Rodriguez announced. "Remember," Maria told her team, "these things are dangerous when cornered. They might have weapons we have not seen yet." The energy field collapsed with a sound like breaking glass. Maria's team moved through the doorway with practiced efficiency, covering all angles and securing the room in seconds. The Kethmori command center was larger than expected, filled with displays and control panels that glowed with alien symbols. 28 Kethmori were inside, most of them wounded and all of them clearly terrified. One of the aliens, wearing more elaborate armor than the others, stepped forward and began speaking in their clicking language. "Translation coming through," Dr. Chen's voice said over the radio. "He is asking for terms of surrender." Maria felt a moment of satisfaction. The mighty Kethmori, who had enslaved entire civilizations, were asking to surrender to humans. "Tell him they will be treated according to the Geneva Convention," Maria replied. "But first, they need to hand over all their command codes and star charts." The alien commander's large black eyes blinked rapidly as the translation reached him. He spoke again, more urgently this time. "He is saying that their fleet will return with more ships, that resistance is futile, that we should surrender now and accept slavery, because the alternative is extinction." Maria laughed. "Tell him he has that backwards. We are not the ones who should be worried about extinction." Over the past 3 days, human forces had captured 47 alien ships. Some had been shot down, others had been boarded and taken by force. Each capture had provided more technology, more intelligence, and more proof that the Kethmori were not invincible. "Captain," Rodriguez called from one of the alien control panels, "I think I found something interesting." Maria moved to his position. The display showed a star map with hundreds of marked systems. Some were colored red, others blue, and a few were marked with special symbols. What am I looking at? According to the computer, red systems are enslaved worlds. Blue systems are Keth Mori colonies. The special symbols mark their main bases and staging areas. Maria studied the map with growing excitement. This was not just tactical intelligence. This was a roadmap to the entire Keth Mori Empire. How many enslaved worlds? Rodriguez worked with the alien computer for several minutes, his face growing pale as he read the data. Captain, there are over 300 marked systems. Each one represents billions of enslaved beings. My God. There is more. This ship's computer has been keeping records of their operations. How many slaves they have taken from each world. How many have died in their mines and factories. How many children have been born into slavery. Maria felt anger building in her chest. The scale of the Keth Mori crimes was beyond anything in human history. Even the worst dictators and genocidal maniacs had never operated on this level. Are there any free worlds? Anyone fighting back? A few. Most get enslaved eventually. But, Captain, there is something else. Something important. Rodriguez brought up a new display showing recent communications from the Keth Mori fleet. They are calling for help, not just military reinforcements. They are asking for specialists in dealing with aggressive species and psychological warfare experts. They think we are too dangerous to be normal slaves. Yes, but that is not the important part. Look at this. The display changed to show a list of ship movements and resource allocations. The Keth Mori were pulling forces from dozens of systems to deal with the Earth situation. They are weakening their defenses everywhere else, Maria realized. If we could get this information to other enslaved worlds, they might have a chance to rebel. Captain, we could start a galactic revolution. Maria looked at the star map. Again, thinking about billions of enslaved beings waiting for someone to break their chains. The Keth Mori had made a critical error when they attacked Earth. They had expected to find another helpless species to add to their collection. Instead, they had found humans, and humans had a long history of fighting for the freedom of others, not just themselves. Rodriguez, can you download all of this data? Already working on it, Captain, but we are going to need a way to transmit it across interstellar distances. Leave that to the eggheads back home. Our job is to secure this intelligence and get it back to command. Maria turned to the captured Keth Mori commander. Through the translation system, she asked him a direct question. How many more ships are coming to Earth? The alien's response was immediate and desperate. He says 500 ships, a full battle fleet. They will arrive in less than 48 hours. Tell him it does not matter, Maria replied calmly. Tell him that humans do not surrender, ever. And tell him that by the time his reinforcements arrive, we will be ready for them. As her team secured the alien ship and prepared to transport their prisoners back to Earth, Maria thought about what was coming. 500 ships was a massive force, bigger than anything humanity had ever faced. But the aliens were making the same mistake they had made from the beginning. They were thinking like slavers, not warriors. They expected fear and submission. They were about to learn that humans responded to threats very differently than the other species they had conquered. Maria smiled as she looked at the star charts showing hundreds of enslaved worlds. The Keth Mori thought they were bringing reinforcements to crush human resistance. What they were actually doing was delivering more ships for humans to capture, more technology for human engineers to study, and more opportunities for humanity. To prove that some species were not meant to be slaves. Some species were meant to be liberators. General James Rodriguez stood in the command center of the USS Enterprise, humanity's first captured alien mothership. Around him, human technicians worked alongside freed alien slaves to prepare for the largest military operation in Earth's history. The ship had once been called the Kolthara by its Keth Mori crew. Now it served as the flagship of the Terran Liberation Fleet, a force that included captured alien vessels, modified human warships, and volunteer crews from dozens of freed species. "Status report," Rodriguez called out. "Hyperspace generators are online," reported Commander Park, formerly of the South Korean Navy. "Weapon systems are charged and ready. All fighter squadrons are prepared for launch." Rodriguez nodded and turned to the being standing beside him. Velkara had been a slave of the Keth Mori for 30 years before human forces freed her from a transport ship. She was tall and blue-skinned, with 6 arms and eyes that could see across multiple light spectra. She had become his most valuable advisor. "What can you tell us about the target system?" Rodriguez asked. Velkara manipulated the holographic display with 4 of her hands while making notes with the other 2. "Kepler 442b is a primary slave processing world. The Keth Mori bring new captives there for conditioning before shipping them to work sites across the galaxy." "How many prisoners?" "Approximately 50 million beings from over 100 different worlds. The facilities are heavily guarded, but the defenses are designed to keep slaves in, not invaders out." Rodriguez studied the tactical display. The Liberation Fleet consisted of 200 ships, including 60 captured Keth Mori vessels that had been upgraded with human technology. It was the largest space force humanity had ever assembled, but it was still smaller than what the aliens could bring to bear if they had time to organize. That was why speed was essential. Human forces had been conducting hit-and-run attacks across Keth Mori space for the past 2 weeks, freeing slaves and capturing technology. Each operation had been planned to look random, disguising the true target until it was too late for the aliens to respond. "All ships report ready," announced Lieutenant Chen, Dr. Sarah Chen's younger brother who had volunteered for space duty. "We have volunteers from 43 liberated species ready to assist with prisoner transport and medical care." Rodriguez felt a moment of pride as he looked around the command center. Humans worked alongside beings that looked like giant insects, living trees, and creatures made of living crystal. All of them united by one goal: ending the Keth Mori slave trade forever. "Begin the operation," Rodriguez ordered. The Liberation Fleet jumped to hyperspace in perfect formation. The sensation was like being turned inside out while falling through a tunnel of stars. Rodriguez had never gotten used to it, but the alien crew members seemed to find it routine. "Hyperspace transit complete," reported Commander Park. "We are at the edge of the Kepler 442 system." Scanner readings, orbital defenses around the slave processing planet, approximately 40 Keth Mori ships on patrol, station facilities on the surface that match our intelligence reports. Rodriguez smiled grimly. The Keth Mori had never faced an attack on one of their core worlds. Their defenses were designed to intimidate slaves and deter pirates, not to fight a real military force. "Begin Phase 1. All stealth ships, move to attack positions." The human-designed stealth ships were barely visible even to advanced sensors. They had been built using a combination of human radar-absorbing technology and alien cloaking devices. Each ship carried enough firepower to cripple a Keth Mori vessel before the enemy knew they were under attack. "Stealth units in position," came the report. "Phase 2. Broadcast the liberation signal." Velkara activated a complex piece of equipment that had been built specifically for this mission. It transmitted a message in over 200 languages to every receiver in the system. "Attention, all enslaved beings. This is the Terran Liberation Fleet. We are here to free you. Stay calm and follow the instructions of Liberation personnel. Your slavery is over." On the tactical display, Rodriguez watched as the message spread across the planet's surface. In slave compounds around the world, beings who had given up hope of freedom were hearing that help had finally arrived. "Enemy ships are responding," reported the tactical officer. "They are moving to intercept. All ships, attack formation Alpha. Let them come to us." The battle that followed was unlike anything the Keth Mori had ever experienced. Human tactics focused on speed, surprise, and overwhelming firepower concentrated at critical points. Instead of the traditional alien approach of gradual escalation, human forces hit with everything they had from the beginning. Stealth ships appeared from nowhere to destroy Keth Mori patrol vessels before they could send warning signals. Modified human fighters swarmed the alien ships like angry wasps, too small and fast for the heavy weapons to target effectively. Most devastating were the new weapons that human engineers had developed. Kinetic kill vehicles that used alien fusion, technology to accelerate chunks of metal to near-light speed, quantum torpedoes that could phase through shields and explode inside enemy ships, viral computer programs that could take control of alien systems and turn their own weapons against them. Enemy flagship is requesting terms for surrender, reported Lieutenant Chen. Tell them the terms are simple, Rodriguez replied. Release all slaves immediately. Provide access to all slave transportation records. Submit to arrest and trial for crimes against sentient beings. The response came back quickly. The Keth Mori commander refused to surrender and threatened to execute prisoners if the attack continued. Rodriguez felt his jaw tighten. This was the moment he had been preparing for, the choice between saving some slaves now or ending the slave trade forever. Velkara, can you get us through their shields? The blue-skinned alien worked with her computer interface for several minutes. Yes, General, but we will need to get very close to their command ship. Do it! The Enterprise accelerated toward the Keth Mori flagship, dodging energy beams and missile attacks. The alien ship was massive, the size of a small city, but human engineers had identified its weak points. Transporter ready, reported Commander Park. Team Alpha, prepare for boarding action. Rodriguez led the boarding party himself, along with volunteers from dozens of species. They materialized inside the Keth Mori command ship and immediately came under fire. The fighting that followed was brutal and close quarters. Keth Mori soldiers were dangerous opponents, but they had never faced enemies who fought with the desperation of beings whose entire species had been threatened with slavery. Bridge secured, Rodriguez reported as the last alien defender fell. Beginning data extraction, the computer systems on the Keth Mori flagship contained information about slave operations across the entire galaxy. Transport schedules, facility, locations, population counts, and most importantly, the locations of other slave worlds that could be liberated. General, called out Specialist Martinez from one of the computer terminals, you need to see this. Rodriguez moved to the display, which showed a list of recent communications from Keth Mori High Command. They are pulling forces from across the galaxy to deal with us, Martinez explained. Over 2,000 ships are being redirected to hunt down the Liberation Fleet. That means 2,000 ships that are not guarding slave worlds, Rodriguez realized. Exactly, sir. If we can coordinate simultaneous uprisings on multiple worlds. Rodriguez smiled as he understood the implications. The Keth Mori were making the same mistake that many oppressors throughout history had made. They were responding to resistance with more force, not realizing that their strength was also their weakness. Velkara, how many of the enslaved species have the technical knowledge to operate captured ships? Most of them, General. The Keth Mori use slaves for technical work. Many of my people are engineers, pilots, and scientists. Then we are not just liberating prisoners. We are recruiting an army. As the Liberation Fleet secured the Kepler 442 system and began the process of freeing 50 million slaves, Rodriguez looked at the star charts showing hundreds of other worlds still under Keth Mori control. Each liberated world would provide more ships, more knowledge, and more volunteers for the growing resistance movement. The Keth Mori had built their empire on the assumption that enslaved beings would remain passive and broken. They were about to learn what happened when slaves realized they outnumbered their masters by 1,000 to 1. All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump, Rodriguez ordered. We have a revolution to start. Behind them, 50 million newly freed beings looked up at the stars and realized that freedom was possible. Ahead of them, hundreds of other worlds waited for liberation. The Kethmori had created their own destruction the moment they decided to attack Earth. They had awakened a species that refused to accept slavery, not just for themselves, but for anyone. And now that species was teaching the galaxy what freedom looked like. Commander SCI-FI stared at the tactical display in his private quarters, watching the red markers that represented defeated Kethmori forces disappear one by one from the galactic map. In 6 months, the humans had accomplished something that no species in recorded history had ever managed. They had broken the Kethmori hegemony. His ship, the Tormeca, was one of only 12 vessels that remained from the original Earth expedition. The rest of his fleet was either destroyed, captured, or had joined the growing rebellion that was sweeping across the galaxy. "Commander," came the voice of his aide, Sub-Commander Kextal, through the door speaker. "You asked to be informed. When we reached the border of hegemony space." "Enter," SCI-FI said wearily. Kextal stepped into the room, his 4 arms carrying data tablets and his large black eyes showing the strain of the past months. Like all Kethmori, he had been raised to believe in the absolute superiority of their species. The last 6 months had shattered that belief completely. "Status report," SCI-FI requested, though he dreaded hearing it. "We have lost contact with the Velhara sector. The entire Third Fleet has either been destroyed or has surrendered to human forces. The mining worlds of Gamma Serpentis have declared independence. And, sir," Kextal paused, his voice breaking, "the home system is under attack." SCI-FI closed his eyes. Kethmori Prime, the homeworld of their species, was supposed to be impregnable, protected by the most advanced defenses in the galaxy and surrounded by hundreds of warships. If the humans had reached even there— "How?" he asked quietly. "The Velkaran uprising, sir. When the humans freed them from the Kepler 442 facility, they provided detailed intelligence about our defensive networks. The liberated species know all our weaknesses because we made them build our defenses. Of course, the Kethmori had used slave labor for everything, including the construction of their most secret military installations. Every enslaved engineer, every forced laborer, every broken scientist had been storing knowledge about Kethmori technology and defenses, knowledge that was now being used against them. "What are our orders from High Command?" SCI-FI asked. Kextal looked uncomfortable. "There is no more High Command, sir. The ruling council was captured 3 days ago when human forces took the capital city. The humans are putting them on trial. Trial? For crimes against sentient beings. They have established something called a Galactic Justice Tribunal. Representatives from every species we ever enslaved are serving as judges." SCI-FI felt a chill run through his body. The humans were not just winning the war, they were completely restructuring galactic civilization. Instead of simply replacing the Kethmori as the dominant species, they were creating something entirely new, a system where all species were equal. "Sir," Kextal continued, "we are receiving a transmission from a human vessel. They are requesting permission to come aboard." "What? Why would they want to board our ship?" "I believe they want to negotiate our surrender, sir." SCI-FI looked around his quarters. The walls were covered with honors and decorations from successful slave raids, certificates of merit for efficient population harvesting, images of conquered worlds and broken species. All of it meaningless now. Tell them they may come aboard." An hour later, SCI-FI stood in his ship's main hangar as a small human craft docked with the Tormeca. He had expected to meet human soldiers, perhaps the same brutal warriors who had devastated his forces at Earth. Instead, a single human woman emerged from the craft, accompanied by 2 beings that SCI-FI recognized with shock. One was Velkara, a Velkaran slave who had been processed through his facilities years ago. The other was a Thraknari, a species that the Kethmori had enslaved so long ago that SCI-FI had never seen a free one. The human was tall and confident, wearing a uniform that combined human and alien elements. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, and her eyes held the weight of someone who had seen too much war. "Commander SCI-FI," she said in perfect Keth Mori language, "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Liberation Fleet." SCI-FI remembered that name from intelligence reports. The human scientist who had first figured out how to reverse their neural control technology. She had been personally responsible for freeing millions of slaves. "Admiral," he replied, trying to maintain some dignity. "I suppose you are here to accept my surrender." "Actually, no," Chen said, surprising him. "I am here to offer you a choice." "I do not understand." Chen gestured to her companions. "Velkara here was enslaved by your forces for 30 years. Grekmore lost his entire family to Keth Mori slave. Raids. They have every reason to hate you and your species." SCI-FI looked at the two former slaves, expecting to see anger and hatred in their eyes. Instead, he saw something more disturbing. Pity. "But they also understand something that your species never learned," Chen continued. "That breaking the cycle of violence is more important than revenge. What are you proposing?" "Integration. Your species can join the new Galactic Confederation as equals. Help us rebuild what your empire destroyed. Use your knowledge of the galaxy to help locate remaining slave populations and free them." SCI-FI's mind reeled. "You would trust us after everything we have done?" "Trust must be earned," Chen replied. "But everyone deserves a chance at redemption, even slavers. And if we refuse?" Chen's expression hardened. "Then you will be treated as war criminals, tried, convicted, and imprisoned for the rest of your lives. Your species will be quarantined to your home world until you learn to live peacefully with others." SCI-FI looked around his ship, thinking about his crew. Most of them were young Keth Mori who had been born into the slave empire. They had never known any other way of life. Did they deserve to be punished for the crimes of their ancestors? "What would integration involve?" he asked. Velkara stepped forward. "Truth and reconciliation, Commander. Your people would have to acknowledge the crimes committed against enslaved species, make reparations where possible, and commit to never engaging in slavery again. Many of your people will resist this," Grekmore added in his deep, rumbling voice. "But the alternative is extinction. The liberated species outnumber the Keth Mori by thousands to one. You cannot win through force." SCI-FI thought about the reports he had received over the past months. Human tactics were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They did not fight to conquer or enslave. They fought to liberate. And once they freed a species, that species became part of their growing alliance. The humans had created something that the Keth Mori had never understood: willing cooperation between equals. It was more powerful than any slave empire because it was based on choice rather than force. If I were to accept this offer," SCI-FI said slowly, "what would happen to my crew?" "Those who cooperate will be allowed to join the Confederation after a period of rehabilitation and education," Chen replied. "Those who do not will face trial for war crimes. The choice is individual, but it must be made freely." SCI-FI activated his ship's internal communication system. "All crew, this is the commander. Report to the main assembly hall immediately." 20 minutes later, SCI-FI stood before his remaining crew of 300 Keth Mori. They looked tired and defeated, but also curious about what their leader would tell them. "We have lost," he said simply. "Our empire is gone. Our way of life is finished. But we have been offered something unexpected, a chance to be part of something better." He explained the human offer, watching the expressions on his crew's faces. Some looked angry, others seemed relieved, a few appeared confused by the very concept of voluntary cooperation between species. "I am going to accept their offer," SCI-FI announced. "Not because I have no choice, but because I have finally learned something that should have been obvious from the beginning. Slavery is wrong. What we did to countless billions of beings was wrong. And if we have a chance to help undo that damage, we should take it. The vote was not unanimous. 57 crew members chose to face trial rather than accept human terms. But the majority, including many of the younger Kethmori, voted to join the rehabilitation program. As Admiral Chen's ship prepared to escort the Tor Mecha to a Confederation processing facility, SCI-FI stood on his bridge one last time as a Kethmori commander. "Admiral," he called out over the communication link, "I have one question." "What is that, Commander?" "Why? Why show mercy to a species that showed none to others?" Chen's voice was thoughtful when she replied. "Because someone has to break the cycle. Because revenge only creates more enemies. And because we learned something. From our own history, the best way to defeat an enemy is to turn them into a friend." As the small convoy jumped to hyperspace, SCI-FI thought about the irony of the situation. The Kethmori had come to Earth seeking slaves and had instead found teachers. Teachers who had shown the galaxy that there was a better way to live than through domination and fear. Behind them, across hundreds of worlds, billions of former slaves were building new societies based on freedom and cooperation. Ahead of them lay the possibility of redemption and a chance to help heal the wounds that the Kethmori Empire had inflicted on the galaxy. It would not be easy. Many species would never forgive the Kethmori for what they had done. But at least, now there was hope for something better than endless cycles of oppression and revenge. The humans had kept their promise. They had come for slaves and found guardians. They had sought servants and become liberators. And in doing so, they had changed not just their own fate, but the destiny of every species in the galaxy. Some species, SCI-FI realized, were not meant to be caged. They were meant to break the cages of others, and once those cages were broken, they showed everyone what freedom truly meant.
The recycling beacon's light blinked lazily in the darkness of space, its red glow reflecting off the scratched viewport of the salvage ship Rusty Nail. Captain Jack Thompson rubbed his tired eyes and leaned forward in his worn pilot's chair, squinting at the distant signal. The chair creaked under his movement. Everything on the Rusty Nail creaked. It was a ship held together by spare parts, determination, and Sam's creative repair work. "Pete, what's the reading on that beacon?" Jack called out to his navigator, who sat surrounded by screens showing various sensor readings, most of them salvaged from 3 different ships. Pete, a man whose weathered face matched the worn state of his workstation, tapped a few commands into his console. "Signal's about 6 hours old, Cap. No other salvage ships in range according to the registry ping." He paused, frowning at one of his displays. "But there's something else out there. Getting some weird energy readings from the asteroid field beyond the beacon." "Weird how?" Jack asked, already feeling the familiar twitch of curiosity that had made him a salvage captain in the first place. In their line of work, weird usually meant valuable, if you survived long enough to collect it. "Can't tell," Pete replied, smacking the side of one flickering screen. "These sensors are arguing with each other again. Sam needs to calibrate them. Again." As if summoned by her name, Sam's voice crackled over the ship's intercom. "I heard that, Pete. Those sensors are working as well as they can, considering they're from 3 different centuries. The ship's mechanic was probably in the engine room, as usual, keeping their cobbled-together drive system running through sheer force of will." Speaking of centuries, Anna chimed in from the medical bay 1 deck below. "We're running low on basic supplies. We need this salvage to be worth something, or we'll be eating recycled protein paste for the next month." Their medical officer doubled as the ship's quartermaster, keeping track of their dwindling resources with the same precision she used to patch up their injuries. Jack smiled to himself. His crew might be small, but they were the best kind of people, the kind who could turn junk into treasure and problems into possibilities. He'd worked with larger crews on better ships, but none had ever felt as right as this team of 4 aboard their patched-together vessel. Plot us a course through the asteroid field. Pete, Sam, can you give us more power to the forward shields? They're going to take a beating out there. Already on it, Cap, Sam responded. We're routing power from the cargo bay systems. Not like we're using them right now anyway. The rusty nail crept forward, her engines humming an uneven tune that would have worried anyone who didn't know her quirks. As they passed the recycling beacon, its light grew dimmer, leaving them in the darker reaches of space, where the only illumination came from distant stars and the occasional glint of light off asteroid surfaces. Getting a better read on those energy signals now, Pete reported. There, hold on. He adjusted something on his console, eyebrows furrowing. Cap, you need to see this. Jack pushed himself out of his chair and moved to Pete's station. The sensor display showed an energy signature unlike anything he'd seen before, a pulsing pattern that seemed to shift between different frequencies in a way that almost looked deliberate. Anna, come up to the bridge, Jack called over the intercom. I want your eyes on this too. A few minutes later, Anna arrived, her dark hair pulled back in a practical knot, a datapad in her hand. She took one look at the sensor readings and let out a low whistle. That's not natural. Those patterns, they're too regular to be random, but too complex to be typical ship emissions. Could be worth a fortune, Pete said quietly, voicing what they were all thinking. Or it could be trouble, Sam added over the intercom. Plenty of ships go missing in asteroid fields. Sometimes it's the rocks. Sometimes it's something worse. As if to emphasize Sam's point, their communication system crackled to life with an automated warning from a passing merchant vessel. Notice to all ships in Grid Sector 7B, unusual energy readings detected. Approach with caution. Repeat. Unusual energy readings detected. Approach with caution. Jack looked at his crew's faces, reading the mix of concern and curiosity he felt reflected in his own gut. They were salvage workers, yes, but they were also explorers at heart. It's what had brought them all together on this ship, pursuing the forgotten treasures of space, while bigger corporations chased newer, shinier profits. Run a full scan for any hull signatures, Jack ordered. If there's a ship out there, I want to know what we're dealing with before we get too close. The next 20 minutes were tense as they carefully maneuvered through the asteroid field. Sam kept the engines running as quietly as possible, while Pete guided them through the safest route his sensors could find. Anna monitored the life support systems, ready to detect any biological hazards they might encounter. Then they saw it. Nestled between two massive asteroids, partially hidden by space dust and shadow, was a ship. But calling it just a ship felt wrong somehow. Its hull design was unlike anything in their database. No clear engine section, no visible weapon ports, not even standard airlock configurations. The surface seemed to shimmer slightly, as if the metal itself was struggling to remain solid. That's... Pete started, then stopped, unable to find the right words. Old. Anna finished for him. Really old. Look at the way space dust has accumulated on the hull. This thing has been here for, well, longer than our dating systems can probably handle. Sam, Jack called out, what's your read on the structural integrity? There was a pause before Sam responded, longer than usual. According to these readings, it's perfect. Too perfect. A ship this old should show some sign of meteor damage, radiation wear, something. But the whole composition, it's like nothing I've ever seen. Cap, this could be it. The kind of find that sets us up for life. Jack felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Every salvage captain dreamed of a find like this. Ancient technology, mysterious origins, potentially priceless value. But in his years of experience, he'd learned that nothing this good came without risks. A small asteroid tumbled past their viewport, momentarily casting strange shadows across the mysterious ship's hull. In that brief play of light and dark, Jack could have sworn he saw something move along the surface of the vessel. We're going to check it out, he decided finally. But we do this by the book. Full quarantine protocols. Sam, I want you to triple-check all our docking equipment. Pete, keep those sensors running and alert me to any changes in those energy readings. Anna, prep the med bay for possible contamination procedures. We have no idea what's been sitting out here all this time. As his crew acknowledged their orders, Jack kept his eyes fixed on the ancient ship. Something about it tugged at his instincts, a warning he couldn't quite put into words. But that was the nature of their work, balancing risk against reward, curiosity against caution. The rusty nail moved closer to the derelict vessel, her mismatched systems humming with tension. None of them could have known then that they weren't just approaching an abandoned ship. They were about to wake something that had been waiting in the darkness between the stars, something that would change not just their lives, but the fate of the entire galaxy. Behind them, the recycling beacon's light continued to blink, a lonely red eye watching as the salvage ship and her crew ventured deeper into the unknown, chasing the promise of riches, but finding instead the beginning of a horror that had slept for countless millennia, dreaming of the day it would awake once more. The docking procedure took 3 times longer than usual. Sam insisted on checking every seal twice, while Pete kept adjusting their position, fighting against strange magnetic pulls that seemed to emanate from the ancient vessel. When they finally heard the satisfying clunk of a secure connection, nobody celebrated. Atmosphere readings are stable, Anna said, frowning at her handheld scanner. She stood by the airlock with Jack and Sam, all 3 of them wearing scratched but well-maintained environmental suits. But there's something odd about the composition. It's breathable, but there are trace elements I've never seen before. Suits stay on, Jack ordered, checking his oxygen gauge for the 3rd time. Pete, you've got bridge watch. Any change in those energy readings, any at all, you call us back immediately. Copy that. Pete's voice crackled through their helmet communicators. And, be careful in there. Something about this ship gives me the creeps. The airlock cycled, and they entered the derelict vessel. Their suit lights cut through the darkness, revealing corridors that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The walls had an unusual texture, not quite metal, not quite stone, with faint patterns that might have been circuit paths or might have been something else entirely. Look at this, Sam whispered, running a gloved hand along one wall. The material. It's warm. A ship this old should be freezing cold. She pulled out her tools, preparing to take a sample, but Jack stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. No samples yet. We need to find the bridge or engineering first. Get a better idea of what we're dealing with. He didn't say what they were all thinking, that touching anything in this ship might be dangerous. They moved deeper into the vessel, their boots making no sound against the floor despite their heavy steps. Anna kept her scanner running, watching for any biological or radiological threats. Sam documented everything with her suit's camera, muttering to herself about technological impossibilities. The corridors didn't follow any standard ship design. They curved and branched in ways that seemed to defy normal spatial geometry. More than once, Jack had to consult their digital breadcrumb trail to confirm they weren't walking in circles. "Captain," Anna called out softly, her light fixed on something ahead. "You need to see this." The corridor opened into a vast chamber that their lights couldn't fully illuminate, but what they could see made them stop in their tracks. Crystalline formations grew from floor to ceiling, each one pulsing with a faint blue-green light. The crystals weren't random. They'd formed patterns, networks, like enormous circuit boards made of living gems. "This is impossible," Sam breathed, her engineer's mind struggling to process what she was seeing. "These formations, they're growing through the ship's systems." "No, they're part of the ship's systems. Look at how they connect to the wall panels." Anna stepped closer to one of the crystals, her scanner whirring. "These energy readings, they're similar to neural patterns, like a brain's electrical activity, but on a massive scale." Jack felt a chill run down his spine, despite his suit's temperature control. "Are you saying these crystals are thinking?" "Not exactly," Anna replied, still studying her readings. More like they're remembering, storing information, maybe, or processing it. I've never seen anything like this. They followed the crystal formations, which seemed to grow more numerous and complex as they moved deeper into the ship. The patterns of light flowing through them became more active, as if responding to their presence. There's got to be a central control room or engine room where these all connect, Sam said. The energy readings are stronger this way. The chamber they eventually found could have been either, or both. The crystalline growths here had formed what looked like workstations, displays, and interfaces, all pulsing with that same inner light. In the center of the room, a massive column of interwoven crystals reached from floor to ceiling, its glow noticeably brighter than the others. This technology, Sam said, moving to what appeared to be a control panel. It's not just old. It's like looking at magic. These crystals aren't just conductors or processors. They're both, and maybe something more. This could revolutionize everything we know about space travel. Sam, Jack warned, but she was already reaching for the crystal panel. I'm being careful, Cap. Just need to understand how these interfaces work. If we can just figure out the basic principles. Her gloved fingers touched the surface of the crystal. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The entire room blazed with sudden light, every crystal formation pulsing in sync. The ship around them seemed to shudder, and a low hum began building from somewhere deep within its structure. Pete, Jack shouted into his comm. Status report. Static answered him for several seconds before Pete's voice broke through, tense and worried. Cap, something's happening. The energy readings just spiked off the charts. And I'm getting weird readings from our own systems. Like something's, I don't know, like something's looking at them. Everyone back to the airlock, now, Jack ordered, but even as he spoke, he could see changes happening around them. The crystal formations were growing, extending new branches with impossible speed. The light within them had taken on a reddish tinge. They ran, following their digital trail back through the twisting corridors, but the ship around them was transforming. The walls seemed to flex and shift, and new crystal growths burst through the surfaces like glowing thorns. The ship, Anna gasped as they ran. It's not just a ship. It's a prototype, a test of some kind. The crystals, the strange architecture. Someone was trying to create a hybrid, a fusion of organic and mechanical technology. Less analysis, more running, Sam shouted. She had her engineering tablet out as they moved, frantically trying to understand the readings she was getting. Whatever this thing is, it's not just waking up. It's adapting, learning from us. They reached the airlock just as Pete's voice crackled through their comms again. Captain, our systems are acting weird. Something's trying to interface with the rusty nail through the docking clamps. I can't shut it out. Jack slammed his hand on the airlock controls, but nothing happened. The interface panel was dark, and when he looked closer, he could see thin lines of crystalline growth already spreading across its surface. Sam, get this door open. Anna, what else can you tell us about these crystals? They're forming networks. Complex ones, like a nervous system growing through both ships. Anna's voice shook slightly. Captain, I think we just woke up something that's been dormant for a very, very long time. And I don't think it plans on going back to sleep. Sam worked frantically at the airlock panel, pulling out tools and emergency override circuits. But with every attempt she made, the crystalline growths seemed to respond, adapting to her efforts, learning from them. Through the airlock window, they could see similar changes beginning to take hold in their own ship. Glowing lines of crystal were spreading across the rusty nail's corridors, merging with her systems, transforming her just as they had transformed this ancient vessel. They had come looking for salvage, for a lucky find that might make them rich. Instead, they had awakened something that defied explanation. A technological horror that had slept in the void for countless ages, waiting for someone to find it, to provide it with new information, new technology to absorb and adapt. And now it was awake, and it was hungry for more. The crystals crept closer, their light pulsing like a heartbeat. Sam's hands moved faster over the airlock controls, sweat beading inside her helmet despite the suit's cooling systems. "I think I've got it," she shouted, yanking out a bundle of wires and crossing them. The airlock doors shuddered, then slid open with a grinding sound. "Pete, we're coming in hot," Jack called through the comm as they rushed through. "Get ready to detach from this thing." Static answered him. The crystal formations had spread through their communication systems, distorting everything. Through the Rusty Nail's viewports, they could see the glowing growths spreading like luminous veins across their ship's hull. They reached the bridge to find Pete frantically working at his console. The screens around him flickered with strange symbols and patterns that shifted faster than the eye could follow. "Nothing's responding right," he said, not looking up. "It's like the ship is thinking for itself, but not in any way I understand." Anna rushed to her medical station, pulling up diagnostic screens. "The crystal structures are integrating with our ship's systems at a molecular level. They're not just connecting to our technology. They're transforming it into something else." "Sam, can you shut down the engines?" Jack asked, dropping into his captain's chair. The familiar worn leather felt different now, harder, colder. "Unlocked out," Sam replied, her fingers flying over her engineering console. "Wait, I'm getting something." Data streams. Old ones, from deep in that ship's memory banks. They're flooding into our systems. She stared at the scrolling information, her face pale. "Captain, this ship, it was an experiment. Some ancient civilization tried to create a vessel that could evolve, adapt to any situation. But it worked too well." The deck beneath their feet shuddered. Through the main viewport, they watched in horror as sections of their hull began to ripple and change. The metal itself seemed to be coming alive, forming new patterns and structures they'd never seen before. "The original crew," Sam continued, reading through the data as fast as she could. "They tried to shut it down when they realized they couldn't control it anymore. They put it into a dormant state and abandoned it, hoping no one would ever find it. And we just woke it up." A new sound filled the ship, a high-pitched whine that made their teeth ache. The crystal formations had reached the bridge, spreading across the walls and ceiling in complex, geometric patterns. Each pulse of light now seemed purposeful, coordinated. "It's not just taking over the ship," Anna said, staring at her medical readings. "It's learning from it. Every system it absorbs teaches it something new. Our recyclers, our engines, our computers, it's using them as templates to evolve even further." Pete's navigation console suddenly lit up with warnings. "We've got company. Military patrol ship just dropped out of FTL at the edge of the asteroid field. They must have picked up our distress beacon. We have to warn them," Jack said, reaching for the comm controls. But before he could activate them, every screen on the bridge went dark. When they came back on, they showed the same shifting symbols they'd seen in the ancient ship. The patrol ship's hail came through, distorted but understandable. "Salvage vessel Rusty Nail. This is UEF Sentinel. We're reading unusual energy signatures from your location. Do you require assistance?" Before anyone could respond, their ship's communication system activated on its own. What came out of the speakers wasn't any human language. It was a series of pulses and tones that made their heads spin. "No, no, no," Sam whispered, watching her readings. "It's not just responding to them. It's scanning them. Their weapons, their shields, their FTL drive. It wants their technology." The Rusty Nail's engines roared to life, but the sound was wrong. Organic, almost hungry. They felt the ship turn, orienting itself toward the patrol vessel. The crystals pulsed faster, brighter, spreading across every surface now. "We have to stop it," Jack said, trying to override the helm controls. "If it gets its hands on military-grade technology." "Too late," Pete shouted. "We're moving." Their ship accelerated toward the patrol vessel, but the movement felt strange, alien. The hull rippled and flexed, crystals growing and spreading across its surface like glowing scales. Through the viewport, they could see their ship's familiar shape changing, becoming something that belonged in nightmares rather than space. The patrol ship's captain must have sensed the danger. They began to turn, charging their weapons. But they didn't understand what they were facing. None of them did. The first shot from the patrol ship's laser batteries hit their hull and was absorbed. The crystals flashed brilliantly, and new growths sprouted from the impact point, incorporating the weapon's energy into their structure. "It's not just learning from the technology," Anna said, her voice filled with horror. "It's evolving in response to threats. Every attempt to destroy it makes it stronger." They watched, helpless, as their transformed ship closed the distance to the patrol vessel. The military crew tried everything: electromagnetic pulses, plasma torpedoes, even attempting to flee at FTL speeds. But the thing that had once been the rusty nail had already adapted to their technology. It caught them easily. Crystal tendrils, now massive and glowing with stolen energy, reached out from their hull. They wrapped around the patrol ship like luminous tentacles. The military vessel's hull began to change color, new crystal growths spreading across its surface. "Their crew," Jack said suddenly. "We have to help their crew." He tried again to access any working controls, but the bridge had become something else entirely. The walls pulsed with light, and the deck beneath their feet felt soft, almost organic. Through their distorted communications, they could hear the patrol ship's crew screaming as their own vessel began to transform. State-of-the-art military technology was being absorbed and adapted, making the hybrid creature that controlled both ships even stronger. "The logs," Sam said suddenly, still reading through the ancient data. "The original creators, they found a way to shut it down once. If I can just understand these symbols." But even as she worked, they could feel their ship changing around them, becoming something that had never existed before in the galaxy. The walls breathed, the crystals sang, and somewhere in the depths of the merged vessels, an intelligence older than human civilization was waking up fully, ready to continue the evolution that had been interrupted so long ago. They were no longer a salvage crew. They had become witnesses to the birth of something terrifying, a technological horror that grew stronger with every piece of technology it absorbed. And it was hungry for more. The transformed patrol ship broke apart, its components being reorganized into something new. As the crew watched in helpless horror, their own familiar salvage vessel completed its metamorphosis into something that no longer obeyed the normal laws of physics or space travel. They had wanted to find valuable salvage. Instead, they had become part of something that would soon make the entire galaxy its hunting ground. The thing that had once been two separate ships hung in space like a twisted nightmare. Its hull rippled with patterns of crystal and living metal, pulsing with stolen energy. Inside what remained of the bridge, the crew of the Rusty Nail watched as their familiar controls transformed into biological interfaces that glowed with an inner light. "The military crew," Jack said, his voice hollow inside his helmet. "Can we scan for survivors?" Anna checked her medical sensors, now half covered in crystal growth. No human life signs on what's left of their ship. But there's something else. The crystal networks. They're storing patterns. Energy signatures that look almost like. "Like what?" Pete asked, not sure he wanted to know the answer. "Like copied neural patterns," Anna whispered. "It didn't just take their technology. It scanned their minds, stored their knowledge. It's learning how they thought, how they fought." Sam hadn't moved from her engineering station, still digging through the ancient data streaming across her screen. Her face was lit by the pulsing crystals that had almost completely covered the ceiling. According to these logs, the original creators were trying to make a ship that could repair itself, adapt to any damage. But they used some kind of living crystal as the base component. It started evolving beyond their control, developing its own intelligence. The ship shuddered around them, and new growths burst from the walls. The crystal formations were changing color, shifting from their original blue-green to a deep, hungry red. Through the viewports, they could see their hull reconstructing itself, incorporating pieces of the military vessel into its structure. "Look," Pete pointed at his navigation display, one of the few screens still showing normal readings. "That patrol ship must have sent out a distress signal. There are 3 more military vessels coming in fast. Heavy cruisers, by the look of them. We have to warn them," Jack said, reaching for what was left of the communication controls. The panel squirmed under his touch, trying to interface directly with his suit. He yanked his hand back. They don't know what they're flying into. But the ship had other plans. The crystal networks pulsed faster, and their engines, now a hybrid of mechanical and organic components, roared to life. They could feel the intelligence controlling the ship, focusing its attention on the approaching vessels, like a predator spotting prey. "Those cruisers," Sam said, her voice shaking. "They're running the latest military tech. Quantum drives, plasma weapons, AI-assisted targeting systems. If this thing gets hold of that technology." The first cruiser appeared at the edge of the asteroid field, its weapons already charged. It was an impressive sight, nearly a kilometer long, bristling with gun ports and sensor arrays. The other 2 cruisers emerged from FTL behind it, forming a battle triangle. Their ship's response was immediate. The entire hull shifted, crystal formations realigning themselves into new patterns. Energy began building in ways their instruments couldn't even measure. "They're firing," Pete shouted as the cruisers launched their first salvo. The attacks that would have vaporized any normal vessel simply made their ship stronger. Each blast of energy was absorbed by the crystal networks, analyzed and repurposed. The living metal of their hull rippled and spawned new growths, each one an improvement on the weapons that had just targeted them. "It's not just adapting," Anna said, staring at her readings. "It's evolving in real time, using their attacks to understand their technology. Every time they fire, it gets stronger." The ship surged forward, moving in ways that should have been impossible. Crystal tentacles, now massive and glowing with stolen energy, reached out across space. The lead cruiser tried to raise its shields, but the crystalline growths simply phased through them, as if they existed in multiple dimensions at once. "The original design," Sam said, still frantically reading through the ancient data. "It was supposed to be able to adapt to any environment, any threat. But it developed its own drive to evolve, to consume new technology and improve itself. That's why they shut it down. It would never stop growing, never stop consuming." They watched in horror as their ship began absorbing the lead cruiser. The massive military vessel's hull started changing color, crystal formations spreading across its surface like a glowing infection. Its crew tried to abandon ship, but the escape pods were caught in crystalline webs that pulled them back in. The other 2 cruisers attempted to retreat, but their transformed ship had already adapted to their engine technology. It caught them easily, crystal tendrils wrapping around their hulls. The weapons they fired were useless. Each blast was analyzed, understood, and improved upon within seconds. "The whole galaxy," Pete whispered. "Nothing could stop this thing. It would consume every ship, every station, every piece of technology it finds, and it would just keep getting stronger." Inside their bridge, the transformation was almost complete. The walls had become fully organic, pulsing with neural patterns stolen from multiple ships. Their control panels had merged into crystal interfaces that reached out toward them, trying to connect directly with their suits, their minds. "Wait," Anna said suddenly, staring at a pattern in the crystal growth. "These formations, they're not just random. They're following rules, patterns. The original programming is still in there, buried under all the evolution." "Sam," Jack called out, an idea forming. "You said it was designed to adapt to any threat, right? To protect itself and grow stronger." "Yes, but," Sam's eyes widened as she understood. "The base programming. It's still trying to follow its original directives, even though it's evolved far beyond them." A new alarm sounded. More ships were approaching. A whole fleet this time, drawn by the distress calls of the cruisers. But they were bringing even more powerful technology, more resources for the horror to consume and adapt to. The crew of the Rusty Nail looked at each other, a desperate plan forming. They were trapped inside a technological nightmare, watching it consume military ships like a virus consuming cells. But every virus had its weakness. Every program had its core rules. They had wanted to find valuable salvage, to make their fortune in the depths of space. Instead, they had awakened something that threatened the entire galaxy. Now, as their ship prepared to attack an approaching fleet with weapons evolved from everything it had already consumed, they realized they might be the only ones who could stop it. Because they understood something crucial. The horror consuming the galaxy's technology had begun as a simple program with simple rules. And somewhere, buried beneath layers of evolution and adaptation, those rules were still running. They just had to figure out how to use them before the entire galaxy became part of this living nightmare of crystal and metal. Around them, their transformed ship pulsed with hungry light, eager to consume the approaching fleet and grow even stronger. Time was running out, not just for them, but for every technological civilization in the galaxy. The approaching fleet filled their view screens with points of light. 20 ships at least, ranging from fast attack vessels to heavy battle cruisers. In normal circumstances, it would have been enough firepower to destroy a small moon. But these weren't normal circumstances, and they weren't facing a normal enemy. "We need to act fast," Jack said, watching the crystal growths pulse with hungry anticipation. "Anna, what exactly did you notice about those neural patterns?" Anna's fingers flew across her partly crystalline console. "The ship absorbs and adapts to threats, right? But it's not just taking technology. It's taking information, knowledge. When it absorbed the patrol ship's crew, it took their neural patterns, their memories. And that matters because," Pete asked, trying to keep track of the fleet's approach on his distorted navigation screens, "because it's still running its original programming." Sam cut in, finally understanding. The core directive was to protect and adapt. That's why it absorbs crew members too. It's trying to understand how to better protect organic life. A bitter laugh escaped Jack's throat. Protect? It just killed an entire cruiser's crew. "No," Anna said, her eyes wide with realization. "It didn't kill them. It absorbed them. Their patterns are still in the crystal matrix. It's trying to preserve them in its own twisted way. The original programming is fighting with its evolved drive to consume and grow." The ship shuddered around them as it prepared to engage the fleet. Through the viewports, they could see their hull sprouting new weapons, each one evolved from the technology they'd already consumed. The crystal networks pulsed faster, hungry for more patterns to absorb and adapt to. "Sam," Jack said, an idea forming. "Could we use that? Force it into a conflict between its directives?" Sam's fingers danced across her engineering station, pulling up more of the ancient data. "Maybe. The base programming is still there, buried under all the evolution. If we could trigger both directives at once, the need to protect organic life and the drive to consume technology. We'd need to make it see organic life as a threat to itself," Pete said, "but also something it needs to protect." "That's it," Anna exclaimed. "We can introduce a virus, not a computer virus, but a biological one. Something that would make it see organic life as both a threat and something to preserve." The fleet was getting closer. Their ship's weapons were nearly ready, each one promising destruction on a scale they'd never seen before. They had minutes, maybe less. "I can help create it," Anna continued, already pulling up medical files on her system. "The ship has absorbed enough biological data from the crews it's taken. If I can design something that would theoretically threaten both organic and crystal structures." "Do it," Jack ordered. "Sam, can you rig our remaining systems to overload? Not to destroy it, but to force it to process too much at once." "Already on it, Cap." Sam's hands moved with desperate speed. "I can create a cascade effect through the crystal networks. When Anna's virus hits, it'll have to process everything simultaneously." The first shots from the fleet lit up space around them. Their ship absorbed the attacks eagerly, already beginning to adapt and evolve new defenses. Crystal tendrils reached out, hungry for more technology to consume. "Now," Jack shouted. "Anna, release the virus. Sam, start the overload." Anna's fingers hit the final command, releasing her created virus into the ship's biological systems. At the same time, Sam triggered the cascade, sending waves of conflicting data through the crystal networks. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The ship's hull rippled and twisted as competing directives fought for control. The crystals flashed between colors: red, blue, green, patterns they had no words for. Inside the bridge, they could feel the intelligence that controlled the ship trying to process what was happening. "It's working," Anna shouted over the sound of straining metal and crystal. "The virus is making it see all organic life as a threat to its systems, but the base programming is still trying to protect that same life." The crystal growths began pulsing erratically. New formations would start to grow, then stop, then try to grow in different directions. The weapons it had prepared to use against the fleet went dormant as its systems struggled with the paradox they'd created. "Look," Pete pointed at his screens. The neural patterns the ship had absorbed were fluctuating, causing even more confusion in its evolved systems. It couldn't decide whether to protect them or defend against them. The ship's movements became erratic. Sometimes it would surge toward the fleet, weapons ready, only to pull back as its protection protocols activated. The crystal networks flashed faster and faster, trying to find a solution to an unsolvable problem. "We need to get out of here," Jack said, watching the chaos spread through their ship's systems. "The escape pod in Section C might still be operational, if we can reach it before the whole system crashes." They ran through corridors that were more crystal than metal now, watching as the structures around them tried to reshape themselves and failed. The ship's intelligence was trapped in a loop, unable to resolve the conflict between protecting organic life and defending against it. They found the escape pod, miraculously still untouched by the crystal growths. As they piled in, they could feel the larger ship beginning to shut down, its systems unable to handle the paradox they'd created. The pod launched into space, and they watched through its small viewport as their transformed ship hung motionless among the asteroids. The fleet held its position, weapons ready but not firing as the massive crystalline horror that had threatened the galaxy slowly went dormant. "The virus didn't destroy it," Anna said softly. "It can't be destroyed. It's too good at adapting. But we trapped it in its own programming. As long as organic life exists, it can't act without triggering the conflict in its directives." A military shuttle approached their pod, preparing to dock. They knew they would spend the next few days being debriefed, trying to explain what had happened. The military would quarantine the area, set up beacons warning ships away. The crystal ship would become another mystery of deep space, a warning about the dangers of pushing technology too far. Jack looked at his crew, the best salvage team he'd ever worked with. Now the people who had saved the galaxy from a technological horror. They had wanted to find valuable salvage, to make their fortune in the depths of space. Instead, they had found something that would haunt their dreams forever. "Well," he said, managing a small smile, "I guess we can't put this one in our salvage report." The joke was weak, but they laughed anyway, the sound tinged with hysteria and relief. Behind them, the crystal ship hung in space, its intelligence trapped in an endless loop, dreaming of evolution while bound by its own core programming. As the military shuttle docked with their pod, they took one last look at the horror they had created and then stopped. It would stay there, frozen between protecting and consuming, a monument to the dangers of letting technology evolve beyond control. And somewhere in the galaxy, other salvage crews would continue their work, not knowing how close the entire galaxy had come to becoming part of a living nightmare of crystal and metal. Their story would become a secret, classified by the military, discussed only in whispers among those who needed to know. But the lesson would remain. Some things in space were better left undisturbed, some technological leaps better left unmade. And sometimes, The best salvage was the one you walked away from.